95 to 99% of purchasing decisions are made subconsciously. A lot of the things you end up doing in marketing, a lot of the strategies you employ, you don't actually realize that the customer, there's so many other subconscious factors that determine whether somebody's going to buy from you. My first love was definitely psychology. I noticed that it was, at the time, business psychology or organizational psychology was very much directed towards big corporations. Not so much the startup entrepreneurial journey. The power of psychology is the fact that it brings something that's in the background into awareness for you to be able to help the buyer make the right decisions.
Today's guest is Jyoti Patel, who is the exit co-founder of Red Rickshaw and Feastbox, and she now angel invests and helps other startups to grow and succeed. Jyoti's got an interesting story where she went through the management consulting route originally, went to strategy consulting, and then after finding that she really struggled to get ingredients she needed to create authentic meals, she decided, why doesn't she do something about that? At the beginning, it was hard, and you can see all the struggle she had right at the beginning stages, before being able to grow and expand rapidly and getting a huge amount of orders, being able to expand the team, go into different areas and internationally, to then working out how she's going to exit this business and what's her next steps. I really hope you enjoy this story. I'm Amma from the Bay HQ, and this podcast is powered by HSBC Innovation Banking.
Great to have you here today, and it's been a long time in the making, and you've done so many different things now, and you said you've had 3 different careers, but when you're as a kid growing up, what did you want to be? What were your ambitions?
Oh, wow. So many. I mean, I wanted to be an astronaut, an FBI agent. I mean, I think, when you're that age, you just get influenced. And I think I still watch too many X-Files. So I wanted to be an FBI agent. But I mean, I would say that my first love was definitely psychology. Just, nature of growing up in a big family. And, at the time, my mum, being from India, the only holidays we ever used to have was also just going to India. So not only was I surrounded by people 24/7 when we used to go to India, I mean, and, you'll probably remember your first trip to India. It's fairly overwhelming. And I think, there's a whole different experiences that happened where you just it just hits home. So when I first went to India, as you can expect, you're like, oh my God, how can people, live like this, etc. And then, I've got almost like 30 to 40 cousins. But despite, all of the downside of what you see, I mean, people were still smiling, they were happy, they were very joyful. So I always used to wonder, why people act the way they do. And what is happiness? And it always I was very kind of introspective from a very young age, just by the nature of being surrounded by people. And so I always knew that was something that I wasn't very academic. And I didn't grow up in a very academic house. The thing that we would talk about wasn't like, hey, have you done your homework? How was school? It was, what did you eat? Who did you speak to? It was very, very different. So, I think it was just understanding human behavior was, I think, my first passion. And then
Did you go on to study that?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. And I always knew at an early age that I would love business as well. And I think going back to this India experience, there's this one time, so this is the very first time. So, I wore these particular, jeans or trousers, and this was back in, I don't know, over 30 years ago. And this was in not in the main city, like Mumbai anyway. It was in Bhavnagar, so Gujarat area. I literally, you can go to India, go pick out your material during the day, go and find a tailor, and by the evening they'll come and deliver it to you, what you want. So I had something made, similar to my trousers or whatever I had. Then lo and behold, so they come and deliver it to me. The very next day, that same design and print was up in 5 shops in, on the main shopping area. And then by the end of the week, there were people wearing this particular type, and I was like, how did this happen? So I was always very fascinated with business, and you just making something from nothing, I think, is a real skill, and you'll see entrepreneurs, in India, real entrepreneurs who actually know overnight how to build a business, and they go and do it, and they're happy. So I think they were like very influential aspects of my life when I was growing up. And then, coming back to the UK, like being with my family, like I said, it was okay. When it came time to choosing a course, I was like, how do I know what I want to do for the rest of my life? I mean, that's just, how can anyone know? Unless you're like, just extra special and you really do need to know. But I knew I loved people. So I studied psychology, and I think that's where it just took a life of its own, really. I actually, even before university, I actually also did it for A-level. So it was, kind of studied it for over a decade by that point. So just loved understanding human behavior, understanding, behaviors at home, whatever it is. And then I kind of took that passion of psychology, and then I was like, I knew what I wanted to be. I want to be a psychologist. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So much so, it's quite funny that again, not coming from a family where our priorities weren't really academic, but it was more like happiness and food. Like I even turned down an offer from Oxford because they did psychology with physiology. And I was like, oh, that's not straight psychology. That's not pure. I want to go do it. So obviously in hindsight, I'm like, that's questionable. But I went and did that for 3 years at university.
So obviously then going into university, studying this psychology, which you're really passionate about, at some point you then have to start thinking about what's the next career step, right? So obviously, a natural thing is I can be a psychologist, I'm going to be a therapist, something like that. But you didn't necessarily go down that path to begin with. What made you decide to go into the career you first did after university?
Yeah, so I think going back to my passion for business and psychology, I became a business psychologist. So I knew I didn't want to become necessarily a counselor or health psychologist. I think that was maybe too far apart from where I wanted to be. But I saw business psychologist as marrying my passion for business with marrying my passion for with people and understanding human behavior. So as I was studying, it was very much, my mind was very set on I want to become a business psychologist by the time I graduated, which is what I then did go and do. Then I went and did my master's in business psychology, and I then, went and practiced as a business psychologist.
And obviously having that dream for such a long time, when you were a business psychologist, did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy that role or that time of your life?
I did. But then I also became a little bit, I would say, I don't think boredom is the right word, but I have this, once I know something, I get bored pretty quickly. So then I'm like, I need continuous challenges. And so after kind of doing quite a few organizational psychology projects, I noticed that it was, at the time, business psychology or organizational psychology was very much directed towards big corporations. Not so much the, startup entrepreneurial journey, because it was all mainly around leadership, productivity, but ways on applying that in a corporate setting. And I was like, okay, this is fantastic, but I'm not getting to, how do you build a business? What is actually business? You're able to kind of have a, top-down view of business from a, people perspective, but it didn't give you how does a business work? And I think that just kept calling back to me, thinking, but how does a business work? How is it set up?
And so obviously you had that's the first stage of your career in many ways, right?
Yeah.
And when did this ideas of I'm going to build my own thing start to come into play? Or where did those first ideas come from, the first seeds?
Yeah, so I think that was then joining the world of management consulting that I did. And I did that over a course of a decade and loved it. What I gained from that was amazing, because I got a picture of what good looks like in a business. Obviously, at that stage when you're a consultant, you see everything. You've got the HR department, you've got IT department, you kind of understand how the cogs come together. And then you do client work, which is always problem focused. And you're either helping them make money or you're helping them save money. So it was an eye-opener, because it was like, right, okay, I really know A, how businesses work, and B, like the type of problems you get as, that you kind of get shipped in to go and solve. And so that then started getting me, all excited about, okay, I'm getting a step closer. I know I've worked in various different departments. I know what business could look like. Yeah, so it was very much so. I actually fell pregnant, and I was also at the same time very frustrated in my career. In that, I, again, going back to, you're really good at what you do, and then you think, what next? And it was a very comfortable, very lucrative career I was already having, that I had. And but it was just the sheer fact that I became pregnant. And I had a terrible experience with going grocery shopping. And going back to the foodie that I am, I was just like, oh, this is frustrating and I need to do something. And I just kept thinking in the back of my head, oh my God, how am I going to do this when I've got kids? And, shopping for Asian groceries was quite a horrendous experience. You turn up and, you worry about your car being dented on because it's so like, the car parks are so like cramped, but then, the shelves are empty, not the freshest of ingredients, and then carrying like 10 kg bags of rice and spices back. And it's just like, how am I going to manage that with children? And eating Asian food was like very much part of me. And I couldn't, and I, for a long time, in fact, just to avoid that shopping experience, I used to just buy all these other vegetables and put lots of spices in. And I'm sure everyone has done that, but it's like you miss the actual authentic, Asian food. So I think that frustration, and then I was probably just a little bit crazy, thinking, right, I need to do something. I'm pregnant and I need to have a solution. So that's kind of how my cogs started ticking and thinking about business.
And so it's interesting because obviously you've got so much experience working with other businesses.
Yeah.
And like you said, you can see that level of what makes a good business, what makes a lot of businesses fail as well, and then trying to implement them to your own business.
Yeah.
So you can see the problem, it's a problem that affects you. What are the first steps you took to try to see if you could actually make a business out of this and see if you could go somewhere?
It was very much initially, Bill, your first thought of having a business is, right, okay, I know I want this, but does somebody else want this? Is it actually worth making a business out of? And, many VCs, entrepreneurs will talk about product market fit eventually, but before you even do that, you need to make sure that it's a viable business that there's going to be a demand for, right? So initially I was just like, it was, also inspired by off the bandwagon of Ocado at the time. So I kind of entered this startup world before there was a startup world almost. So it was back in 2010. And I noticed with, Ocado, it was like the ease of grocery shopping. I was like inspired by that business model. And I thought, okay, there's definitely, I'm not going to go and do a bricks and mortar business. So what is the next best thing? Then being inspired by obviously online grocery and how popular it was becoming, I was like, let's try this. Okay, what do you need? You just need a website. Okay, obviously it's a learning experience back then, and you just kind of do as much research that you can whilst kind of being in a full-time job. And then that's kind of how I initially got started. It was like, okay, get a website. Let's try and understand what type of products might sell. And it was all based on things I liked initially. It was all based on, let me see if this is going to work. And if other people have this pain point, is it a pain point worth solving? And is this pain point actually going to make money? So, I think the whole business context aspect comes into it, where is it a passion? Because not all businesses should be built on passion, because they're not all viable. So is it actually going to make money? So I think from the very beginning, I was always very focused on, is this, and in all honesty, it was going to be something where I thought it's going to be a pension business. Is this a side hustle? Let's carry on. I've got a really good career. Is this something that I can eventually retire off? Just do something small on the side. And so that's kind of how it started.
We hope you're enjoying the episode so far. We just want to give a quick shout out to our headline partners, HSBC Innovation Banking. One of the biggest challenges for so many startups is finding the right bank to support them. Because you might start off and try to use a traditional bank, but they don't understand what you're doing. You're just talking to an AI assistant, or you're talking to somebody who doesn't really understand what it is you're even trying to do. HSBC have got the team that are built out over years to make sure they understand what you're doing. They've got the deep sector expertise, and they can help connect you with the right people to make your dreams come true. So if you want to learn more, check out hsbcinnovationbanking.com. looking at that as well, because I've got two sides to the problem, right? One is how do you get people to find the website, to buy products from the website?
Yeah.
But you've also got to get the stock in the first place, and how do you pick the right products that you said?
Yeah.
And which of those sides do you think was harder at the beginning to get right?
It's quite funny because when I first started, there was no, I think there was Facebook, but it was very early days. So I think Facebook entered the UK late, like 2005, 2006. So again, I'm going back, when you didn't have social media advertising. And I remember for the, very first time trying Facebook as advertising. So even before that stage, I had already started selling, and that was mainly through Google, which was the main online platform for online selling and online advertising. So I wouldn't say what kind of led to our growth would have been word of mouth and Google advertising, but also by the sheer fact that it was novel. We were the pioneers of Asian grocery delivery in the UK. So, it was the fact that a lot of people, it turns out, had this pain point, and just the fact that this service existed. It just accelerated. And I think, and going back to your question of product warehouse, so yeah, and I think this is the thing with business is that you always got to save up. You always need some money to start a business, right? And so I actually did embarrassingly go and spend my weekends in these shops, in these Asian grocery shops, and seeing what people picked up. Literally taking pictures of shelves, looking at pricing, looking at what people walked out the door with. I did that during my lunchtimes. I was based in Farringdon, and I think there was can't remember what the high street is just behind there. So literally going there in my lunchtime and taking all the pictures, uploading it, looking at the prices. So that's how it all started. And I initially bought it and then rented a warehouse. Very, very small, warehouse. I think it was in Wembley to start off. And again, I think the journey was that I'm in a full-time, a full-time career. Who's going to do the packing? Who's going to do the picking? So all of that, I then did end up hiring very early stage just because it was a D2C business model.
How did you find that first hire? Because I think, we're doing that right now. As I mentioned, we're doing our first full-time in-person hire.
Yeah.
And finding the right person can be so difficult for so many people. We seem to be quite lucky, and the person's going to be watching this, so obviously we really like you. But how did you find that first person to come on board when, like I said, it's an early stage business? Yeah. They don't yet know how much security there's going to be, all those different challenges. Yeah,
so there was two things. And I think coming back to, there's two sides of the business. One, there's a logistics side. And the second part is more operational, online, digital. So naturally, having come from the consulting world and having done this several times, I fully knew the benefits of outsourcing. So I set up an office in India, basically, and A, labor arbitrage, B, the time difference. It just helped. So my day would literally be wake up. Then on my way into my job, I'd be on the phone to my India team because obviously the time difference. Then I'd kind of do my full job, and then on the way back from the train, I'd be speaking to my UK logistics team. So it kind of worked. So in terms of the operational side, hired a team in India just to do, product uploads, images, product descriptions, and it was embarrassingly bad, very early stage, but it was very much get it live, get in, let's just start seeing what works. It was very amateur, the first site. But at the end of the day, it was, let's get it live and see, because before you invest too much money into it, is this going to be worth investing your time and money into it? So that's what I did in terms of hiring an India team. And then in the UK side, it was literally hiring for part-time, like 2-3 days a week. So naturally, we couldn't deliver every day. And so I managed to attract somebody who was actually wore multiple hats for us, who not only went to the cash and carries to buy the products, they then stocked the shelves, packed the boxes, and even delivered. Wow. So they were full on tasking within that one role. And then as we grew, we then started expanding.
And you mentioned this, at this point, you've still got your full-time job.
Yeah.
And like you said, you've got young kids as well. Yeah. There's always different things to juggle. When did you decide it was the right moment for you to take a step back out and go, okay, this is now going to be my full-time thing and I want to see how far I can take this?
Yeah, so I think it was we basically got to 1 million in sales while still working a full-time
Wow.
job. And I think it was at that point where, I mean, it was a huge milestone. And up until then, it was just all about, hustling, being a mother, taking the kids to warehouses on the weekends and then going into the office. And then I think it was literally a natural, the business model itself is very asset heavy. You need a lot of cash flow because all of my income was going into buying more products, which were selling out very quickly. So then I had to replace and then keep buying and doing that. So it wasn't, it was at a point where when we reached 1 million, I was like, okay, I don't have enough money to actually literally expand this business because it's quite ridiculous. So then it was at that point where I was like, and I think this was, where the whole, angel investing, the whole startup world was really maturing. And somebody said, well, actually, why don't you go and raise funds? And, you're actually a proper startup now, and I'm like, well, what's that? It was like over my head. So then that's when I started understanding, okay, what's, raising funds and how do I do that? And then I went and raised, my first round, which was 500,000. And I still hadn't given up right then. I think it wasn't until my second round, because the first round, we then actually put it into the assets, the inventory, the team. Yeah. And I got it to a stage where it was still kind of running, that I could still have my job. But then when I did my second round, which then naturally, along with VC investment, you need to be fully invested into your business, is when I then took the jump.
So I feel like today that's quite rare for somebody to take it that far and then go for funding from VCs. And how was your reaction from VCs when they realized that they'd been doing so much as a part-time gig?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the reception I got was amazing in that they can see a person who's fully dedicated, fully invested, especially financially fully invested, managed to grow a business to 1 million in sales without any external funding. So for them, it was, MVP, traction, growth, all of the right metrics. So in that sense, I think it was a really good deal.
Yeah, but I imagine I don't see many deals like that now where they must have been shocked just to see how much you've been able to do before even going full time.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about angel investment and about VC investment. Yeah. How did you look at that at that point? Because I guess at that, like you said, the startup world we're still maturing in stage, right? Now there's everybody seems to have a VC and there's 1 million VCs with different names. Yeah. But back then there had been a lot fewer options of where to get this funding from.
Yeah.
How did you decide which way to go in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time, because I knew I had exhausted my own funds and I was so deeply invested because the business was growing itself, and like I said, I was not spending money on marketing. And I think that was the biggest indicator of success, in that, our customer acquisition costs were very low compared to the return on investment we were getting. So it was at that point where I was like, hey, this isn't a pension business. Now I need to go and fully, grow this business. So the mentality, initially when you grow your own business is the very Asian mentality that ownership is everything. You grow your business and you don't really part with stake. And so that whole mentality was changing, because it was like, actually, you know what, this business is making a difference in people's lives. And I never imagined it to grow this big. And so it was like, actually, let's go and do this. So, yeah.
Then taking it full time, right? So like you said, I hope that because of all the success you'd already had, it must have felt hopefully easier to now go full time into this. But how did you find that transition of now this is your full time thing, all your energy isn't going one direction, you don't have, not that your job was a distraction, but it was like your attention was split, right?
Absolutely.
And now being a full-time entrepreneur with this multi-million revenue business, how was that experience? How did that feel?
It was actually very tough, because even though the business was making 1 million, I wasn't making 1 million.
Yeah.
And I was very well paid in my corporate career. But then when I had to take the jump, I, literally had a third of my original salary. It was tight, because naturally you're not going to raise investment and say, hey, I'm going to have my full salary that I, that I used to be on. So it was, it came with a lot of stress initially because it was trying to make everything work with a third of the income that I had. So I think, if anything, that propelled me to work harder and work faster, because knowing I've got 2 kids and, all the other expenses that you have, it was actually just a motivating factor, if anything, just to say, right, hurry up. Now I'm all of a sudden, I went from a very slow mode pension building business to fast track startup that now I'm actually going for an exit.
What changes do you think you made once you went full time to try to speed up the growth there?
Yeah, so it was literally a team, investment in team. It's, there's a reason why they say it's a teamwork that makes the dream work. And the business model itself required, packers, drivers. You needed quite a lot of talent and a lot of people to kind of make the business work. So the investment went into building the right team initially, and then went into stock, and then into marketing.
Yeah. And because you also have Feastbox as well, right? And there's a slight overlap there as well.
Yeah.
Can you tell about where Feastbox came from and how that relates to Red Rickshaw as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So fast forward, so we then experienced with Red Rickshaw. So it was, became the largest Indian grocer, but then became the largest world food grocer. And so when I say it was actually the largest world food platform, we launched, Asian, Thai, Vietnamese, African, all types of cuisine. And to kind of do that and be, we were the largest online supermarket for world food. And to do that was, in terms of asset, again, going back to products, and it was still a success, because what I found was that, not only does this problem exist in just the Indian communities, it exists in all of these ethnic minority communities. And just by, making sure that we have that right product set, kind of grew. And so we experienced, 100% growth year on year, and amazing, customer acquisition cost, return. And so Feastbox came about because this was around the time where recipe meal kit box companies were also kind of just started doing really well. And it was quite funny because I was like, oh, they're kind of doing something similar to what I'm doing, because we were already delivering, groceries to Edinburgh. And these were like your fresh vegetables and frozen stuff, because we were already doing the cool pack stuff. But it wasn't as widely known as when, the recipe box companies hit the market in the UK. So I'm like, they're literally doing what we're doing. They're delivering food in a box exactly the same way we're doing it. And I was like, well, okay, what advantages does this mean? And I think just through customer research, because you would think that all of our customers would be Asian, but they were not. So in fact, a majority of our customers were non-Asian who just loved Asian food. And so through a lot of customer surveys, customer discovery interviews, questions, we're like, okay, well, what is the biggest challenge? And coming back to the customer service team, the biggest problem was people calling in and saying, well, we love this and we love that, but how do you use this? And how can we do, what can we do? So I'm like, okay, this business model actually marries up 2 things. It educates you in terms of these ingredients, and it gives you these ingredients, because you can't go and find them everywhere. So that's kind of how Feastbox initially came about. Much skepticism initially, because naturally, with shareholders, it's like, well, we've got a fantastic business, just keep growing that business. How is it going to work? But the way I saw it was like, it was actually not a separate business. It was actually a door opener to have to acquire more customers, which is exactly what happened, because it gave people the education to use authentic ingredients. Once we acquired them on the Feastbox side, then they went on to Red Rickshaw to actually go and buy more and more ingredients of what they liked. So
obviously you had like so much learning and growth from Red Rickshaw. Yeah. Once you launched Feastbox, there's obviously lessons you can learn from what you did before.
Yes.
To make that smoother for the next time.
Yes.
What do you think you learned from Red Rickshaw that you could apply to Feastbox really well in terms of the operations and behind the scenes things?
Yeah, I mean, and I think we were really clever in terms of how we did it to make sure that we didn't end up having 2 warehouses or 2 supply chain. It was all off the backbone of Red Rickshaw, because by this time we were importing, Red Rickshaw had grown to a stage where the supply chain was pretty solid. And so with Feastbox, we made use of existing assets, but it was its own, whole new business model, different way of advertising, different marketing economics. And the lessons learned there, to be honest, and I think this was my first experience, because you have a lot of people who are very tainted by their own experience of the business they've grown. So trying to apply some of the lessons, especially in terms of marketing, were very, very different, because now Feastbox was a subscription business. It worked very differently. We were, very much focused on AI and algorithm and making sure we were kind of doing all the matching and bespoke, tailoring for retention purposes. It was a costly business, a lot more costly in terms of acquiring customers. And, it was like 100 times more costly than acquiring a Red Rickshaw customer. Wow. And so then you have to kind of put your thinking hat on and think, right, okay, how do we actually get the cost down and acquire more customers? So it was a different learning experience because of a different business model. Because by this stage, Red Rickshaw we had a B2B model. So we were also doing supplying to restaurants, and we were building out our own restaurant tech as well. So there was the tech side of the business. There was Feastbox, which was the recipe meal kit, and then there was Red Rickshaw, which was the ultimate supply chain and backbone to everything. so different facets to the business. It was very much an omni-channel type business, but each one of them worked differently, to the way when we advertised and brought on restaurants, to the way we actually then sold Feastbox. It was actually a fantastic experience to get to know different business models within one business.
Yeah, and obviously you were able to exit both of those businesses.
Yeah,
and what made you then decide to go on to do what you do today? What made that transition?
Yeah, so by that time, we had raised significant funding, and it was at a point where the shareholders were like, time to sell, perfect time to sell. For me, I was like, not so much, but it's a baby that you've also built over that course of the decade. We ended up it got sold. And then, to be honest, it was already nearing that, because we were already talking to partners about selling. And so in the back of my mind, there was always, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? Because it was so much part of my identity.
Yeah.
So I think there were a couple of things which I was always very passionate about. One thing was, when I had raised investment, I never saw a female investor on the opposite side of the table, let alone, Asian. Yeah. So I always knew it was very difficult to raise money in the UK. So I was like, okay, well, there's obviously a problem there. Is that something that, I would want to do? But I think just going back to how it all started and how I got into business was the psychology again, and then just loving business. So I've been helping a lot of founders, B2B, SaaS, AI companies kind of establish their growth model, their growth strategy, and accelerate growth. So, but it's also mainly coming down to psychology again. And it's called the psychology influence, which is what I mainly do now, which is helping people. So let me take a step back. So 95 to 99% of purchasing decisions are made subconsciously. Yeah. So a lot of the things you end up doing in marketing, a lot of the strategies you employ, you don't actually realize that the customer, there's so many other subconscious factors that determine whether somebody's going to buy from you.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to do so many experiments, because naturally we had raised considerable funds to do so much testing around consumer behavior. Especially, we had over 2,000 SKUs. So we did a lot of testing in terms of what made this person buy, where they went on the website, but also in terms of framing, positioning. And I then now go back to a lot of the success I had was actually being able to pinpoint some of that. So I think the best way to describe, influence psychology in terms of applying it to business is, we've seen Mad Men.
Yeah.
So the character of Don Draper, I think one of the inspirations of that character was a very famous ad exec called Ross Reeves. Yeah, Ross Reeves. And so there's an example so he was going, this is back in the 30s, 40s, whenever it was. He was going to, for lunch. He was, this was in New York. It was springtime. And him and his colleague were walking, through the park, wherever it was, going for lunch. And they, walked past this man who had a sign saying, "I'm blind," who was sitting on the floor. So then they went for lunch. Came on his way back. The man was still there, still no money in his tin. So he thought, okay, let me help this man. Let me see. So on his sign, it said, "I'm blind," right? So he added 3 words to his sign. And then he stood back to see, okay, what would happen? Any guesses what those 3 words might be?
And need money?
See, so what happened? Yeah, so he actually put, it's springtime and I'm blind, because it was, sunny, fresh air in the park. And what ended up happening was that then all of a sudden when people read that, they realized the inequality of them being able to experience spring and this blind man not being able to experience that. And they felt uncomfortable with that inequality and was more able to then contribute. And then all of a sudden, the blind man was like, what did you write? What did you say? So it's the power of psychology is the fact that it brings something that's in the background into awareness for you to be able to help the buyer make the right decisions. Yeah. Things like that.
So you mentioned about the investment side there as well.
Right.
How's that side been going? What have you been looking at there?
Yeah, so I've partnered up with 2 other fantastic business partners called Paul and Maggie, and we started In This Together, which is an angel syndicate. So going back to this is more focused on companies who want to for companies who want to expand into the US. So we're building up an angel network with US family offices, US based angel network, angel investors who want to invest in the best of the European deals. So it's we've done one deal and we're in the middle of doing another one. So that's again fantastic in terms of helping more people expand, especially into the US, because that tends to be the trajectory of where they want to go and exit.
Nice. And then what made you go down that route in terms of the US side? Is that related to your own experiences, or what made you decide on that as a thesis?
Yeah, so I think just the nature, there are a lot of syndicates and a lot of emerging fund managers. And this was more also based on the fact that it's, when you get to Series B, Series A, Series B, it's very much, to make it go closer towards your exit. The US market is always going to be the core part of your exiting strategy. So it's being able to kind of bridge that gap between the UK and the US, and actually having a cap table where they can actually really help you expand into the US. So it was more from that side.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And we obviously see a lot where, as you said, even 10 years ago, the UK market basically didn't exist.
Yeah.
And there's now more and more happening. For example, we exist. But as you said, the exit-wise, generally you see bigger American companies who could acquire the UK companies. And there's only very few of the UK companies so far who've got to that massive status of being able to have a really big IPO.
Yeah.
And that can change over time. But right now, like you said, the US market is so much bigger.
Yeah.
There's a lot to explore out there. And I guess if you kind of marry those 2 sections there with the investment side and psychology side, how have you found that in terms of the mindset of those UK entrepreneurs who are trying to expand into the US? What are maybe their mindsets that they need to change or adapt in order to be able to succeed in that market?
Yeah, to be honest, conquer your home market first. And I see far too many founders already trying to do geographic expansion when it's not the right time. And that will come naturally. I think once you've conquered one market, you've understood your ideal customer persona, you've got product market fit, and you've got, the right metrics, then is when you kind of start thinking about the next growing in another market. It should always be part of your trajectory, because there's a reason why all companies end up going to the US and exiting there. But don't do it too soon. And I think I would probably give the opposite advice first, to say conquer your home market, and then only think about it once you're at that stage to, actually invest a team, invest more resources, and understand it. Because you end up having to change your product, or you appeal to maybe a different type of customer persona. So it's literally starting a new business sometimes.
Yeah, because we've had that. People have told us, "Oh, why don't you expand to India? Why don't you expand to Pacific?" Because let us get our own thing done first, in one place, and get that right, rather than spread ourselves so thin that you then can't do anything.
Exactly.
But so glad to have you on today. We're going to go to a quick fire questions now.
Sure.
So first one is, who are 3 British Asian entrepreneurs you think are doing incredible work right now, and you'd love to shout them out?
Sure. So definitely Alpesh Unalka. He's at the top of my list. He's a fantastic entrepreneur, 3 businesses, or exited 2 businesses, one of them to a FTSE company, so listed company. So, very big in terms of tech, and he's now, focused on helping business owners raise funds or M&A or just kind of help them grow. So yeah, Alpesh is definitely one of them who's kicking ass out there. Dr. Vanita Rattan, who you've had before, absolutely crushing it in the world of skincare and, spending years on product development and identifying the right type of product for Asian skin. So I think amazing. Amazing female founder, and Hema Wara, who is dedicated her life in terms of women's health, and she's a nutritionist and helping women with their diet and nutrition to help them with their health. So yeah.
And if you want to find out more about you and what you're up to, where should they go to?
So hopefully I'll be active on LinkedIn pretty soon. So find me on LinkedIn, or my website as well is jyotipatel.me. And and just feel free to reach out on either platform, LinkedIn, and love to hear from everyone.
Is there anything that the audience listening right now could help you with, that they could reach out and help you about?
I mean, if there are any US angel investors, family offices, definitely reach out. That'd be amazing. And anyone actually just looking at exploring how to use psychology in marketing, then more than happy to help.
So again, thank you so much for coming on. Any final words?
No, that's it. Thank you for having me and the platform you're building. And hopefully I've inspired somebody out there to go and take that risk and build a business.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.